I want to welcome everybody to today's session. This is a conversational webinar today and should be pretty short and sweet and is the first of two webinars. We're going to tackle what it looks like to master distribution automation in industrial manufacturing. So very specific, and we're really excited to have Matt Butler and Terry Krantz participate in this conversation, and I will hand it over to them to introduce themselves. Matt?
Thanks, Chloe. So nice to see everybody. My name is Matt Butler. I've been in the supply chain space, automation for about 25 years now. In that time, I've played a lot of roles, but I spun off about 4 years ago and established SCT Advisory, where we really help customers plan and execute real transformational strategies to align their supply chain capabilities to their business strategy. So thanks for having me, Chloe.
Great. Again, thanks everyone for joining. My name is Terry Krantz. I'm with SVT Robotics, but have spent just a couple more years than Matt has in the industry. Since '97, I've been focused on supply chain automation. Most recently with SVT Robotics, we've been helping clients to more easily deploy and integrate automation and technology, as well as monitor and keep it running and gain insights from what it is that automation is actually achieving in their organizations.
All right. Thank you, Terry. So today we are having part one, which is really how do you identify opportunities as you start your journey? So we'll be answering questions like, what are the best opportunities to look for? And particularly for your business, right? Because it's not a one size fits all. Then we'll talk about how you assess automation's true value when you really start thinking about ROI. Um, and then finally, lessons learned, right? We have people that are incredibly seasoned and are talking to folks day in and day out, and helping them along this journey. So you don't have to make the same mistakes. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Terry.
Very good. So maybe I'll start with a question to you, Matt. I understand. I think that's great, right? SCT Advisory. This SCT stands for Supply Chain Transformation. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what do you think automation's role is in these transformations when you look at supply chain, and do you see that as central, or is it sort of like something that you do in parallel or off to the side?
Yeah. No, 100%. It's one of the central pillars to any effective transformation. I think as we've seen digitalization and automation really accelerate over the past 8 to 10 years, um, companies are having to take a big step back and realize what it means to compete in their industries. And we see them leaning in three specific areas. As I mentioned, automation is one of the pillars, but really those are, how do I orchestrate my inventory most effectively, understanding demand, understanding supply, understanding availability and placement, and all the costs associated with producing and moving it to get to the end customer, and recognizing the volatility of demand, most importantly. So that's one of the pillars. The second one is really moving towards the customer, and driving more of a supply chain awareness and customer engagements. We like to call it supply chain aware commerce, is the second one. But the third pillar of transformation is just modernizing the abilities around efficiency and resiliency. And that's where automation really becomes core. So as part of those transformations, we see people trying to re-envision how their systems and their physical networks need to operate and need to evolve, right? What is the placement of the facilities? What is the purpose of the facilities? And how do you drive that level of efficiency and natural resiliency into your operation and indeed across your network? So from an automation perspective, there's a number of different functions that need to be considered. One is, as you're building new facilities, as you're thinking about greenfield, what's the right design? How do you lean on automation? Not just to reduce labor costs, but to ensure that you're less dependent on what is increasingly a volatile labor workforce, right? A volatile environment there. And then also, what can you do with what you have now? People are heavily invested. They're looking to sweat their assets. They want to retrofit their brownfields. That's a little bit more disruptive from time to time. So it's really, how do you drive some level of effectiveness and efficiency into your operations without disrupting what you're doing well today? So at the end of the day, we see efficiency, resiliency being these operational objectives, and automation being one of the cornerstone strategies for fulfilling those objectives.
Very good. Chloe, maybe we can move on to the next one because I really think we get into the meat there. Um, when we think about automation within the manufacturing industrial space, you usually think of what you see on the left side, right? These large robots in automotive manufacturing with welding sparks flying everywhere. But the reality is, there's more than just that. Maybe you can talk a little bit, Matt, about manufacturing versus distribution as it relates to industrial manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great history in the manufacturing operations that saw the early adoption of a lot of different robotic concepts. And when you think about why it evolved there as opposed to distribution, it's because of the high focus, not so much on speed, but on accuracy and on its impact to quality control during manufacturing processes, which is essentially the reliability of the product that drives the brand, right? In addition to driving some level of labor efficiency and speed of production. So that's where we saw a lot of the early adoption, a lot of these concepts being proven out. But what we also saw was that always required a deep level of customization, custom programming, a lot of attention to the very finite details of what that automation needed to perform, as well as how. Now, as we look at the distribution environment, different challenges to address, right? I mean, in typical DCs, a lot of the struggles are going to revolve around demand volatility and then increasingly the speed of a fulfillment as customer expectations on 1 day, 2 day, and even business to business expecting that they're going to have orders kind of rapidly fulfilled so that they can keep their shelves stocked. These are the problems that DCs are trying to solve today. And the good news is that the value prop is a little bit different, but it's very scalable, it's very repeatable, and it just needs to be refined to the specific channel and concept and a little bit of the item characteristics with which you're handling. So along with that, as people have thought about bringing robotics to market, it's less been a bespoke like design and implementation motion, and more of how do you develop that repeatable process that allows you to gain those economies of scale, not just in the production of the equipment, but in the implementation and the management of that equipment over the long term. So it lines up very well, I think, specifically with industrial distribution, which is, I think, a big part of why we chose the topic today, because folks in this industry are really embracing automation to drive a higher level of efficiency, effectiveness, and accuracy across a number of different channels and different business problems, right? How you need to deal with retailers, how you need to deal with distributors, and how you need to deal with end consumers. The order profiles are different. The motion of preparing the shipments is different, and the automation required to make that a successful and efficient process is going to be different. So industrial distribution is kind of ripe with a lot of different challenges that can be solved to drive value back into the organization.
Well, maybe we can talk about some of the specific channels next, right? If we move on to retail distribution next, Chloe.
Yeah, and as you think about retail distribution, I think some of these snapshots here, some of these photos are going to be pretty representative of what a lot of folks like me that grew up in warehousing have come to expect in retail environments. It's heavy on conveyor, sortation, moving goods around the warehouse, and preventing some of that travel. I will say what's changed is that these solutions, especially recently, have evolved, fairly to advanced states by incorporating other types of order profiles, other type of automation concepts, and helping to orchestrate what's happening in the fulfillment of these orders across different areas of the warehouse and integrating them to more holistic concept and solution. We'll talk a little bit about that as we kind of wrap up all these different concepts that are more channel specific. So in distribution and fulfillment, you have kind of a different set of challenges, right? The products, or rather, should I say, the orders that distributors are placing, typically involve more expansive SKU catalogs, A lot more volatility in, are you ordering a lot of the same product, but also a lot of very slow moving product. There's going to be a lot more overpack or each picking and then consolidation into containers. And this is brought forward, not everything is being picked on case lines anymore. But you need the ability to rapidly deliver some of these new concepts to the individuals that are creating the packing boxes or even picking into bins, that prevent them from traveling all over a warehouse and drive a higher level of accuracy in the shipment preparation, as well as more efficiency in the process. So concepts like this auto store have evolved, concepts like AMRs, the old Kiva stuff have evolved to really drive those. And maybe Terry, you want to comment a little bit on what you're seeing in adoption.
We do see a lot of that, especially the auto store, and similarly with the Ocado solution that sort of competes with it. Um, it's attractive to our customers because they're able to expand it in several different axes, right? If you need more storage, you can add more bins. If you need more throughput, you can add more robots. So there's some flexibility built into the nature of how the systems. But we see this as a quite popular choice these days. Maybe we move on, Chloe, to retail. We can talk a little bit about that next.
So yeah, I like to talk about direct to consumer, even though a lot of industrial distributors, they're not really worrying so much about that D2C channel. Maybe in some of the hobbyist areas, there are some specialty firms that service this space. But I think everybody can learn a little bit from this Amazon effect, right? What you're seeing is a lot of um, increasing importance being placed on the customer experience. And Amazon has driven us to expect, very high, fast delivery times and really more frequently that tailored packaging. So automation concepts that drive higher levels of each pick, speed of order fulfillment, and then more tightly integrated packaging that reduce damage and increase or decrease the box utilization, the carton utilization, if you will, are increasingly important. So here's an example or two of some of the things. And Terry, again, like, you guys are right in the middle of connecting a lot of these concepts. What do you see in terms of pack size and some of the other competitors that are out there right now with the auto boxing and cartonization frameworks?
Well, we see it deployed in two different ways, right? Sometimes it goes as standalone with the way that FedEx, USPS, and the others have changed the costing rules for shipping. It doesn't pay to ship air anymore. It's not on a weight basis. It's on a volumetric weight basis, and so getting that box size down and doing it based only on what you've picked becomes a great vector of cost savings and efficiency in your warehouse. But you still need to keep it. Flexible. The second vector we see is that oftentimes this is an add-on to automation you may have already done, right? So you focus on making your pick experience inside the warehouse more efficient, but then you can add this on the end to pick up additional savings and efficiency gains on the back end. So quite exciting when we start to merge some of these different channels that we've seen of store fulfillment, direct to consumer, and others. And now we can talk a little bit about omni-channel, right? Which is really the combination of several of those channels. So go ahead, Matt, maybe you can say a few words about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, industrial distributors and the leaders of these facilities and of these networks really have many masters, right? A lot of different channels, a lot of different order profiles, a lot of different levels of urgency, a lot of big, fat, and ugly different types of product characteristics, right? To deal with. So it is really critical that as you're thinking about operations, you're able to orchestrate and prioritize the work that needs to be done with a keen recognition of, how you're throttling that work out to these individual assets. And a big part of that is bringing all of these different types of products across all these different channels to the right shipment preparation areas before they're ready for actual dispatch, right? For retailers, this might be a single truck. It might be a multi-stop truck. For distributors, more than likely, it's going to be 4 to 8 different stops going out on a truck. And often those will get, delegated to an LTL provider. and some of this stuff is emergency and needs to go out parcel, right? So how all of these things can be orchestrated and married up really depends on a different type of automation concept, and that comes into products like OSRs, which are essentially high density shuttles and buffering mechanisms that can allow picks to happen across different areas of the warehouse at different times, but kind of bring them all together before throttling them down to the dock and taking up that high value real estate that is kind of the last touch, the magic love before it goes out to the end consumers. So in a nutshell, there's a little bit of warehouse execution logic that belongs here, but also a very important set of automation concepts and multi shuttles that are increasing in popularity as far as I've seen. I don't know about you, Terry.
Yeah, we've seen that as well, right? You see not just the multi-shuttle, but especially multi-shuttles when you have multiple technologies that you need to merge before things go out the door, right? So it's really difficult sometimes to balance how different pieces of automation, when they can complete it in a portion of a given order in different areas of the warehouse. And a multi-shuttle like Canap here is a great way to be able to consolidate that before things go out to the final destination. Um, well, great. That really covers sort of the differences between the different channels that we see on the distribution side of things. But if we move on to the next slide, Chloe, oftentimes what I hear from my customers are they know that they're getting strategic pressure from management to improve the efficiency of their operation. They know when they look outside the door into the warehouse that they have areas that are inefficient and can be improved. I wonder how SCT sees how operational leaders are really approaching. How do you prioritize these problems that you see within the warehouse? Which one should you go after first, and how do you determine that when you're looking at a supply chain transformation to determine which one gives you the most bang for the buck out of the gate?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot that goes into the way that we think about that. But I think the starting point is just about always getting into the operational executives' heads, understanding the business strategy, and beginning with what problems you're trying to solve, right? So a number of those are kind of salient across the industry. And I think, these are folks with complex operations. We mentioned expansive catalogs, a lot of fast movers, a lot of slow movers, a lot of case picking, as well as piece picking, as well as interpack picking, which is just very conducive to shipping errors, right? And then lastly, kind of managing that big, tall, and ugly type of product. It's a real challenging environment. What we hear a lot about is labor resiliency is coming top of mind. It used to be labor efficiency, but increasingly, as Walmart and Amazon and other companies are putting in these massive DCs, the fight for cost-effective warehouse labor is just so tight right now. Everybody's trying to get in front of it and understand how they can invest to whatever extent their way out of that type of challenge, right? So, to what extent is this augmenting the labor that you need, or potentially replacing it in some areas? And you'll never get rid of them 100%. You're going to need warehouse associates for the sensitive tasks. But to what extent can you protect yourself from the vulnerability of the labor workforce, and also, drive this symbiotic relationship with automation to make their lives easier out in the workforce, which drives a higher level of loyalty and also drives a better work-life experience, right? Because ultimately what you're looking for is not just resiliency, but retention at the end of the day. The second really big one is shipping accuracy. And this is, again, with the Amazon effect, it's becoming the expectation. We're past the days where you throw a case on and it gets returned if it's not the right stuff. You've got to get the product right because your customers need it. Their customers need it. People have leaner inventory profiles. They want less assets on hand. So getting the right products to them is absolutely critical. And doing it in such a way that is efficient is also critical. So, I've seen a lot of these legacy facilities where they're sourcing orders from multiple facilities or from multiple zones in a facility. They're packing them into different packages. Now, consolidation and order management is becoming top of mind. Driving a more efficient fulfillment process follows very close behind knowing what you're trying to ship. And then really driving a better customer experience is the end result of these things. Again, getting 4 boxes and needing to marry them up to a PO is difficult. Getting consolidated orders can be difficult. But how do you actually drive that customer experience where they just open a box and they got everything they ordered and it's neatly stacked? It's not bouncing around. It's got the right level of, packaging around it so it hasn't been damaged. These are all critical aspects, and all of them are things that can be influenced by the right adoption of automation. Um, so, as you think about that, I kind of take it to the next step and say, okay, well, we know what problems we're trying to solve. Well, what's it actually cost you? How are you going to put the value proposition together? How do you develop an ROI? And this is something that really initiates the internal conversation about the need to transform quite frequently and the major opportunities that you're going to get into. So I'll stop without going into details of the business case. I think we'll talk about more of that in the second session. But, I think what is critically important is don't look at it just in terms of how much of a problem these things are and how much you could potentially save right now. You also have to think about it in those final terms of the ease of doing business and say, how much opportunity are you leaving on the table? How much customer loyalty are you giving up as you think about their experiences and your ability to deliver it the way that they want it? And I think that's too often overlooked in a lot of organizations right now, and something we really try to stress during our engagement.
Yeah, I think that last point, Matt, is really relevant, right? I've seen entire projects, multi-million-dollar projects, justified simply on the fact that they've done their homework and realized that order accuracy and customer retention are so highly correlated that it paid for the whole project of automation. Forget about any of the efficiency gains, just in order to get the accuracy higher, paid for the project. If we could go on to the next one, Chloe, um, Matt, maybe you could talk a little bit about what SVT or SCT does to help companies as they're evaluating and creating plans to improve their supply chain.
Yeah, I like to say we kind of offer a full horizon of different services, and it's a little bit dependent on the customer and where they are in their journey. But I'll kind of boil it down to 4 types of engagements that we like to support. The first type is transformational. That's where we like to start. That says you're defining, your business objectives, your priorities, what your network needs to look like, what your automation strategy and support of that network needs to look like, as well as what the IT landscape to effectively orchestrate it needs to look like, right? So those are all the transformational services. From there, we get into more of the strategic. We look at facility design, solution architecture design, get into vendor selection programs, and then we can get very, very tactical as the third element there in planning and oversight. Again, one of the big watch outs is, okay, now you've got a facility. So what are you going to do with it? A big part of what we're moving into and what we're seeing a lot of momentum in is more in that sustainable business process world. So how do you think about maintenance support structures? How do you think about ongoing, calibration of the automation that you purchase, the IT systems, and the continuous improvement programs that need to be in place? Those all require staff. They all consider a process associated with them. And we like to dovetail any of our transformational engagements into kind of how do we manage that steady state for the longer term and to really get your total cost of ownership optimized along the way.
Very good. I think we have one last slide here before we get to some questions, and that is maybe we talk a little bit about our joint experience on how we've seen. Well, anyone who's deployed automation knows that there are plenty of stories of things that have not gone well. So maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the common missteps and misses that companies have and how you might avoid them.
Yeah, 100%. So I'll kind of focus on the obvious first. Because I think where a lot of people have gotten burned is just in the basics, right? Incomplete or poor data accuracy. Just a little bit too much focus on the tactics and on, a specific KPI and failing to embrace a vision or really execute effectively. The ecosystem's at a point of stability at this point where most of, the T's and C's should be addressed if you're bringing in the right partners. But it is important to get in front of the strategy before, leapfrogging into the actual execution. To that point, I think the biggest problem we see And this isn't, hey, did my automation work or not? It's, did I get value out of the investment that I just made? The biggest misstep there is really misinterpreting the business problem, right? And guys, we've all got to recognize that these can be moving targets, right? The ecosystem, the economy, the business environment is transforming before our eyes, and it moves faster than we could hope. If you look back 5, 6 years, there's been a tremendous amount of disruption, and these automation investments and life cycles are very intentionally built to outlast them, right? Because they're big investments and they demand large and long-term ROI. So getting in front of the business strategy, you really need to use that to drive your design conversations. Anybody who tells you, hey, we've got a perfect solution, it's going to fit you like a glove, that's just a red flag, right? Because the reality is the future is all about being nimble and being agile and being able to respond to these business environments that are changing, being future proof. And a big part of that is giving yourself the room to adapt over time. So that's the way we view it. Our methodology really focuses up front on that visioning, alignment with objectives, thinking about competitive landscapes, thinking about how your customer channels are changing and their expectations are changing. And only then can you really assess how well prepared your existing capabilities or proposed capabilities are going to fit into that future state landscape. And at that point, then you're really ready to start going into the detailed design, the RFP readiness, the demonstrations, and the vendor selections that allow you to get what's really necessary, which is your budget ready for a successful implementation that's going to be, that long-term asset, that strategic asset that you wanted over the longer term.
Very good. I don't know, Chloe, do we want to move over to questions? Is that the next last step here?
Sure. So I know we're sort of at top of the hour, so let's get at least one or two in real quick. We'll make them snappy. So how do I know I'm making the right decision around what technology to bring in?
I'll take that one, Matt, if it's all right. It's really probably the largest change that I've seen in my time in the industry over the last couple of decades. And that is when I started out, the focus was totally on maximizing the efficiency of the automation you were putting in, right? They had long horizon payback times. But what we see now, especially over the last decade or so, is that customers don't know what their business is going to be in 18 months, in 24 months. Heck, sometimes they don't know what the business is going to be in 9 months. So the emphasis from our customers has really changed to maximizing flexibility, so that as their business changes, they know what to do. So the technologies that we see winning in the marketplace these days are the ones that put a premium on flexibility and to be able to modify the way that you have them deployed easily, so that you can still retain great value from those automation assets without having to rip them out just because your order profile changed a little bit next year.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. A lot of folks go in with the opinion that an OEM, a single provider, and kind of a rigid ecosystem is going to give them the best bang for the buck because it provides that level of acceleration and repeatability. But I 100% agree that gives it provides an imbalanced ecosystem with your partners and gives them a little bit too much leverage. It's only responsible to build into that level of adaptability, that level of agility early on. And it's not just about the automation. This is an IT landscape. It's people, process, technology. And you need to consider all of those pillars as you design not just a solution, but a future state ecosystem that's going to support it through the implementation and well beyond that for TCO.
Right. Which, if we tie it back to common missteps, you have to be able to, when you're putting together your automation plan, you have to put an emphasis on how will you adapt to changes within the automation strategy that you're putting forward. And that oftentimes is not just about the automation, but it's about pulling out the data that you're generating from that automation, right? To see really how your business is behaving, not just month to month, but sometimes week to week, day to day, or even hour to hour. We see a lot of customers focusing on how you optimize that at that level. was a long answer, Chloe. Do we have time for another question?
Let's try to get one or two more in. This is a good follow up. How do I make sure I'm not being oversold technology?
You want to take that one, Matt?
Yeah, for me, I think that's just be very methodical about the approach of how you're defining um, your problem statement, how you're defining your success criteria, and how you're evaluating the different vendors. These guys are wells of knowledge. So as you engage them, they're going to have a lot of opinions about the best way to do it, the right way to do it, but they're also going to bring options. And, you know, you got to be very careful because these guys know their business, but you know your business. And you got to bring that perspective to the table to deliver the most accurate design.
And I would add to that, Matt, a good question to ask is what data do they make available to you, right? These automation assets, these are digitized assets, right? There are tremendous amounts of data that are generated by these automations when you have them installed. But having the data generated and having it available to you so that you can mine it and sort of generate insights, those are two different things. So it's oftentimes good questions to ask your potential vendors of what kind of data do they make available to you, because you can use this data to further improve your business beyond the automation benefits that they're giving.
Great. Thanks, Terry. And then finally, let's wrap it up with this question. How do I ensure that I'm getting my ROI and how long should it take?
Well, I think well, if I could just carry on with what I was saying, right? So this data driven approach, right? If you're getting that data, it's quite easy to calculate out your ROI, right? How many more order lines are you doing in a given time? How many people are doing that? But really, have you overbought your fleet of robots that are helping you achieve that ROI? Like, what level of data are you getting? It's a surprisingly common problem that people do have trouble to calculate the ROI after the fact. So it is definitely better to ask those questions of your potential vendors up front. How are you going to calculate that, and make sure there's a very clear success criteria so that you can evaluate that after the fact. Matt, you were going to say something before I cut you off there.
Yeah, a little bit of a different tack, right? But ROI is a funny thing because as people invest in automation, they might be building $150 million distribution centers, right? Or they might be just buying a few bots that are going to help them move their e-commerce picks more effectively. So I think that there is a very important aspect of evaluating and positioning ROI internally that needs to be sensitive to the organizational's expectations. But but these should never be one-off programs, right? It needs to be part of a journey. If your organization's ready for $150 million, that's great. And there's a lot of people willing to help you there. But if they're not, you're gonna need to start small and build something that's a little bit, more nimble and incremental along the way. But it's really important that you emphasize that there are intangibles associated with that ROI too. Building a competency in automation implementations and building a adaptable ecosystem that can lower your total cost of ownership for future endeavors as well should be one of the objectives and one of the measures of success for any program. And I just can't emphasize that enough because it will define not the success of the project, but the success of the program and the success of the individual's careers that are part of it.
Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you for part 2 where we'll dive into actually how to execute, right, and design the journey on your path to automate distribution. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the time.
That's all.